All right, guys, this is a big one for me. This is one we've been talking about for months, weeks, well, years, really, if you get down to it. We are talking to Mike Hermann today, and please, Mike, excuse me if I get your title wrong and correct me, but you are the owner, the CEO. What are you of RetroSoft Studios?
Just yeah, that's fine. The creator of
Creator.
RetroMania Wrestling, I'll say.
There we go, and there go. We very lead right away. RetroSoft Studios is, of course, the company coming out with the game we've been talking about right here on the show for weeks now, and that is the official sequel to WrestleFest, the arcade game, and that is RetroMania. I know we've all been waiting for it. We've been talking to our listeners on our chat groups and stuff like that. We have a lot of people that can't wait for this game, and we can't wait to talk to you about it. So I'm going to start right from the beginning there. Mike, why WrestleFest? What out of 40 years of video games to emulate, why WrestleFest?
Yeah, I mean it's my the biggest reason it's my favorite game of all time. So that's number one. You know, I grew up in the kind of arcade era. I guess we all are roughly in that era where we grew up in arcades. And WrestleFest was always one that I was drawn to. I played it as long as it was in the arcades. It was then the first game I when I was introduced to emulators, like in the late '90s. It's the first game I sought after to see if I could. There was an emulator for it and play it at home. And then when I found the cheat code to play as the Legion of Doom, even if it glitched out, I used that. And it was always a game when I was a kid, or it was really a teenager when it came out. It was always a game I was waiting to come to the home consoles,
Right.
and it never did. Um, and I was always disappointed by that. And then, fast forward a couple of years, I started. There's a forum called the Wrestling Legends Forum. Now it's become a Discord server, but it used to be a forum. And there was a WrestleFest forum on there, and I went on there and started posting. I'm like, I'm gonna remake this game as a hobby, blah blah blah. And they're like, no, you won't do it. And I started showing stuff, and we started ripping sprites out of the original. And initially, we were just gonna. My goal was to take the original WrestleFest and just add a couple new characters to it. Um, it wasn't easy or almost impossible to nothing's impossible, but it was very difficult if you wanted to hack it. No one had done it, so which made me think it was really difficult to do because people have hacked just about every other game you can think of. Um, like some of the No Mercy hacks are amazing with the things people have done there. So, but no one did anything with WrestleFest, and then they released the abomination on the iPad called WrestleFest. And then at that point, I started working on the hobby a little bit, but eventually I came to the realization, like, if I was going to actually get this done and do it right, I was going to have to do it for real and do it for a commercial project because it was going to cost some money to develop. So I wanted to earn some of that back. So then, fast forward to 2018-ish is when we started.
That's a
That's
long
amazing.
journey
I love
to
that. That's a
realize.
fantastic.
Yeah,
It's really great to hear that it's coming from a fan. You know what I mean? It's not like a cash grab. It's not someone out
Right.
here to make a buck. It's someone who really loved the game and wanted to pay homage to it.
Absolutely. This is, like I said, I've definitely put more hours into this game than any other game ever. And and I've played some games, like I've played Skyrim, and you have to put a lot of hours into that. Diablo 3 is another, I've played all the Diablos, but especially Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. I've put a ton of hours in that, but I think WrestleFest beat them all. Well, now I guess RetroMania is probably number one because I've been playing that pretty much every day for the last 2 years, just in building it. So, but yeah, it's definitely a 100% passion project. I'm wanted to make the game that I wanted to play for another 30 years, so somebody else remade it.
that is amazing. Speaking of it being, you have called it. You've gone right out and called it the sequel to WrestleFest. Did anybody such as Technos or even WWE give you a hard time about using that label?
Well, no, we actually licensed that label.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
yeah, so Technosuit Japan is out of business. They went bankrupt. I'm not sure what year, but they went bankrupt several years ago. A company called Millennium or Million, I think it was Million. I'm sorry, Million Entertainment was basically a licensing company which bought out other IPs and then licensed them out to other people. So they owned the Technosuit Japan library, and then I think around 4 or 5 years ago, Arc System Works, who you may have heard of, but they make Dragon Ball Z Fighters, the Guilty Gear series, the Blaze Blue series. They also they make a bunch of other games. What was that? River City Ransom. They own that property too. So they bought the whole Technos of Japan library. So I approached them, one, to get the Map Mania was kind of a predecessor to Wrestlefest as well,
Right.
another old wrestling arcade game. So I approached them about, one, getting the Map Mania IP that make an appearance so far in Wrestlefest. We hope to add them as playable characters down the line. But then also, it was a marketing play. I licensed the ability to call myself the official sequel to WrestleFest, since
Right.
they own the rights to the original WrestleFest. But unfortunately, they didn't own any of the character rights, which is why you're not going to see an Arcade 1-Up or that game kind of probably pop up anywhere else, because the licensing the original game is just a nightmare.
Now, I'm going to jump in here if you don't mind,
Absolutely.
Mike. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I did want to have a question that relates to that specifically, which is that why the name RetroMania Wrestling? If this is the official sequel to WrestleFest, why not capitalize on something and call it WrestleFest 2 or WrestleFest Returns or something else with that branding? Why the decision to change the name?
Because Arc System Works took way too long to sign the deal with us.
There
So
you go.
we approached them way early on, but we couldn't get a deal done. It took like 6 to 8 months to finally get them to sign. And at that point, I had already started the marketing of RetroMania. We went down the copywriting it, I think it's a copyright. Yeah, copywriting the name. And getting that done. So yeah, we were actually throwing around RetroFest to tie into WrestleFest, but that was already taken by a action figure line. So yeah, I think if we would have got it early, we might have kept the name and called it maybe WrestleFest 2 to capitalize on it more. But I think RetroMania, in hindsight, I'm really happy with the name RetroMania. But yeah, I hear you. To capitalize on it more would have been better to use that in the name, but unfortunately, the licensing took too long.
I mean, maybe it's because I've been saying the word RetroMania every day for the last 2 years. But I think it really, I love the name. I've always been a big fan of that name. So you already mentioned how you couldn't get any of the rights to a lot of the characters. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about the current roster. How did this come about? Because you have an all-star lineup here. Like it's insane. How hard was it to get some of these guys, or were people just clamoring to be involved in this?
No, we had to do a fair amount of chasing. So, originally I was going to go the YouTuber route. Because I'm a big fan of like retro YouTube channels, just talking about retro games, and like Game Chasers was one of my favorites too. Any kind of retro gaming stuff I was really into. And I just felt that would probably be more approachable, and it was, it would have been easier to do. But eventually I was like, well, let me at least try to go after like real wrestling licenses.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, well, let's start with the top. If I can get the Road Warriors, I can build the whole game around them and kind of just fill in from there. And I did want to tie in with the original game as well, since they were the boss of the original game.
Right.
I thought that would add a lot of credibility to RetroMania as well, and a good tie-in to say we're the sequel to WrestleFest if we had the Road Warriors. So I got a hold of Road Warrior Animal when he was still with us. Before he passed away, and he was pretty easy to deal with, to be honest with you. And then that just kind of opened it up. The best move I did, though, from a licensing standpoint, is I went on LinkedIn and I searched for wrestling video game licensing, and just thinking who would have that in their background. And I really lucked out, because a gentleman by the name of Mike Archer used to work for the WWE, and before that worked for Acclaim Entertainment and worked on the Legends of Wrestling games.
Oh, geez, okay.
So he was pretty local to me. I about an hour and a half drive up to New York, and I met him for lunch, and we talked and hit it off, and he decided to come on as a consultant to the project, and he had a ton of contacts already. One of which was he went to wrestling school. Before he went into business, he did try his hand at wrestling for a year. And he met Tommy Dreamer, and, obviously his paths have crossed with him in the WWE. But when he worked there. But before, he had already had a relationship with Tommy. So Tommy Dreamer was a phone call away. Tommy, you know, now I know him a little bit. He's, you know, become a friend of mine and great guy. Again, even before I knew him, though, he was really easy to deal with and down to earth. So, and I feel like that way was with a lot of the guys were just easy to deal with. But yeah, we got Tommy Dreamer, the Blue World Order, and then even we decided to go kind of the more mixed roster and a very eclectic roster where we have guys from all eras you know, we have WWE representation, the current WWE representation, current AEW, current Impact, current Ring of Honor. You know, we have representation from all these promotions in the game right now, which is pretty cool.
You know, I just want to say that Tony Khan's out here every week on AEW talking about he's the forbidden door. Let's be honest, Mike Herman's the forbidden door. You know, Tony Khan wants to bring all these companies together, but you're the only one that's really done it. If you think about all the personalities and all the companies they represent, let's get that trending. Hashtag Mike Hermann is the forbidden door.
And I think that's one of the things that was most appealing to me. The more and more announcements you made about the game and the more characters that came out, it was more and more interesting because, you know, you had guys, like you said, the old WWF guys like the Road Warriors and Austin Idol and guys like that, and all of a sudden you have like you said,
Cardona and Brian Myers, right? I mean,
there you go. And are you calling him Johnny Nitro or Johnny Retro?
Johnny Retro.
That which is amazing, by the way. And you know, it's so very cool. And then on the other side of it, tomorrow, as it happens to be, we have Ian Riccaboni joining us right here on this show. Please do not miss that, guys.
Awesome.
And Ian Riccaboni will be talking about this game, man. I can't wait to talk about it because he also is involved in this, is he not?
Yeah, the voice of RetroMania Wrestling. Yeah,
amazing.
Ian's been awesome.
How did that come about? I know Ian's a big wrestling historian. So was he must have been really excited to be part of this game.
Yeah, I mean, he was, again, super easy to deal with. You know, like next to no negotiation required. He was on board from the beginning, and he lent his voice to doing color commentary with Colt Cabana, and that really came out because I like Ring of Honor. I liked Colt and him doing play-by-play for Ring of Honor. So I figured, you know, why not reach out? You know, they were approachable. And once we had Colt on board as a wrestling town, I go, well, it would be cool to have Colt and Ian do commentary for us. So 100%. I reached out to Ian, and he was on board. So he did a great job. And then he's also, anytime you pause the game, you see Ian. So he's the main focus image on our pause screen as well.
That is fantastic. Adam, do you have any questions for Mike before I move on?
Yeah, actually, now that you brought up images, I do want to talk a little bit about the artwork in this game because it's incredibly unique in style, and I love the caricatures of these professional wrestlers. They're really fantastic. I want to ask a little bit about, you know, who you reached out to regarding this, who was kind of the mind behind some of that artwork, because I think it's really fantastic. It makes the game stand out even more against that sea of other games that are out there right now.
Yeah, so that Fu Essence is the studio that did the caricature artwork. So Fran and Miguel from Fu Essence, they are actually located in Spain. And I've known those guys for probably going on 11, 12 years now at this point. So I've dabbled in game development and modding and things like that for, you know, forever. And I had an idea, well, a couple things. There's a engine, I'll call it an engine, a 2D fighting game engine called Mugen. And it's basically one of these things where you can just put in any type of sprites, and people have used it to do like Ronald McDonald versus the Colonel from Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Homer Simpson versus the Family Guy, Peter Gibbons or Peter from the Family Guy. And so it's kind of an engine where you plug things in. So when my kids were younger, I started on this project called Pocket World, and it was like Marvel and DC characters, but it's like these little small, if you remember, there was a Pocket Street Fighter game. It was these chibi style characters.
I remember that, yeah.
So I did a game like that with, well, I helped out on, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to take too much credit because I didn't have a ton to do with the programming side of it. But I helped pay for, I commissioned some artwork through just some fan art, to do in those games. And these guys had helped me a little bit. And this is just free to play stuff. About 10 years ago we did. But I'd come in contact, and then we were actually, I was toying around with doing another fighting game back then. And Fran and Miguel did some concept artwork for me. And this is like back in 2012, 2013. And then when RetroMania came, I said, hey, I need some caricature artwork done. And they just knocked it out of the park. I told them the kind of game we were going for, and they just kind of took it from there. And that's, Fran's style really just knocked it out of the park. It really hit the vibe of what we were going for.
And also, I just wanted to quickly ask, was there anybody that you had approached about being in the game that maybe you really wanted but couldn't get, or were just about to go in the game, but for one reason or another, just didn't end up making the final cut?
Yeah, I think, there was one guy just completely outpriced himself, where I was like, I was pretty sure he wasn't worth what he was asking.
Are you going to name names?
No, I'm not going to name names.
Does it rhyme with Moldberg?
No. Not at all. Not at all. It was someone who was a current person. But with that said, he was super professional. Was not a jerk about anything. So, I just think, maybe he'll become worth that, or maybe he is worth that, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But regardless, we couldn't afford it, So there was another legend I wanted to get who wanted more, and I thought they were worth what they were asking. We just couldn't afford it at the time. But for the most part, I got a feel once Mike Archer came on board of what guys wanted and what guys expected. Part of it is we're a small indie firm, so if some of these legends were used to getting like 2K money and these bigger studio payouts and royalty payouts, that wasn't us. But and a lot of guys like Animal understood that, and he was just looking to continue. He looked at it more of as a way to continue his brand and venture off another way to build his brand. And I think that's how most of the guys looked at it was, well, it'll pay us something, and we'll be able to build our brand. It's another avenue to build our brand, and as long as they had that attitude going in, I think we were able to work out a deal.
And
were you able to get any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. You go ahead, Mike.
Were you able to get any feedback from Animal before he passed away on the process of the game?
Oh, he was loving it. It's a shame because I saw him. I saw him at when WrestleMania was in New York. So what was that? 2019. I saw him at WrestleCade.
Okay.
And that was the first time I met him. I went up to him to give him some handouts to hand out to people at his autograph line. And he's like, oh, the game looks great. I'm getting a lot of good feedback about it. Let's keep in touch and talk when you want to promote. So I traded emails, and then I saw him in November, this past November. Or not this past November, a year ago November, but when things were still open at the end of 2019. And, again, ready to promote. We've had some delays on our end, but he was ready to promote, help us with whatever we needed, real good. And then, I traded emails with him about 3 weeks before he passed, and we were starting to plan on promotion. This was back in, August. And then, he was really excited to do it. He actually, he had a Wrestlefest cabinet in his garage, an original Wrestlefest in his garage, which I thought was really cool. So, I was looking forward to putting a RetroMania cabinet into his garage next to it. But yeah, he was definitely a really nice guy to me whenever we dealt with each other, and he was super excited to promote the game. So it was a shame.
Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was just going to mention that, Mike, you had said earlier about, you're a smaller operation. You're not, a 2K kind of operation. It's truly independent. And I would like to know about maybe what some of the bigger challenges and victories that you had during the making and the release of the game?
Yeah, so one of the challenges, well, and benefits and challenges, kind of double-edged sword, a lot of this stuff. So we're 100% remote, and we cover almost every time zone in the world, the team. So, that's a challenge in that my lead programmer is in Vietnam, and he's an American, but he lives in Vietnam, and he's like 12 hours is the time difference. So waking up, we either meet early or meet late at night. But I would say that, so the time zones was always challenging, but in this situation, being virtual already was definitely a benefit to everything. I think probably the biggest challenge though was explaining wrestling to people on the team. So outside of my QA testers, who are other Wrestlefest and wrestling game fans, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, they already knew everything. But my lead programmer, for example, I had to explain why certain things would be programmed that way. Like an Irish whip, why would he just come back into him? You know what I mean? And not just try to hold on to the ropes each time. Just like I don't get that, and so just kind of explaining wrestling to them. So the gameplay mechanics are different than any other game. And I think initially he was treating it as more of a fighting game than a wrestling game, and they're very different, very different animals. So just getting all of that, and getting the artists all in line, because we had a huge number of artists because there's just so many sprite animations in the game. Like each wrestler has like 1,200 different sprites. So that was challenging too, keeping all the artists in sync as well.
Now, I do want to get into the actual technical end of the game. I have some questions about the game itself. But before we get that far, I mean, this is a wrestling podcast. So let's talk about wrestling for a second. Tell me a little about your fandom, Mike. Where did that start?
Yeah, so I started watching. I was at a sleepover at my friend's house. I want to say 6 or 7 years old. It was before probably the year before WrestleMania 1. So, that was 85. So this is like, we're talking like 80 and 83, 84-ish. I slept over a friend's house and he turned it on. I'm like, what is this? He's like, this is wrestling. And we watched Wrestling Superstars. So I'm from the Northeast outside of Philadelphia. So, we're in Vince's backyard. Yeah. And, but, so the next week I looked for it when I wasn't at his house. I looked for it. And I found Jim Crockett Promotions in the NWA, and that was on at 1:00 in the afternoon where I was. And I figured that out. So I started watching that, and I talked to we didn't talk about wrestling for a week or two, and then we brought it up again. And he's like, "Oh, did you see what happened?" I'm like, "Yeah, Magnum TA is the new NWA United States champion." He's like, "What are you talking about?" And I think he said something like, somebody like the Intercontinental Championship had just changed hands or something like that. And I'm like, I don't know, who are you? He's like, did you see the Junkyard Dog match? That was awesome too. I'm like, who's the Junkyard Dog? I'm like, I saw the Rock and Roll Express, and they just beat the Russians for the tag titles. And I was kind of confused as to what was going on, because he didn't know any of the guys I was talking about, and I didn't really know any of the guys he was talking about. And then we kind of figured out, it was two different. We called them leagues. Like, we didn't really know the difference at that point. We thought it was like the kind of in the U.S. we had the NFL, and the USFL was like an upstart league, So we just thought it was two different leagues, and it turned out, they're two different promotions. And I was kind of an NWA guy growing up initially. I liked Jim Crockett Promotions, and then the UWF and the Mid-South stuff with Bill Watts, and the World Class came on at like midnight or something in our market. It came out at midnight, so I watched a little bit of World Class as well.
If I can sidebar here for a second and I just ask, how cool is it to grow up as a Philly boy, to be working with Tommy Dreamer and House of Hardcore, and as an NWA mark as a kid, you're working directly with the company now. Their top prize is featured in your game. Like how do you even handle how awesome that is?
Yeah, it's tough, because especially, I met Tommy back in 2019 as well, in like June of 2019, and it was weird, like, because I saw, I watched. I wouldn't say I grew up with him because he's only a little older than me. You know what I mean? So I think I said that to Stevie too, and Stevie's like 3 years older than me. He's like, "What do you mean you grew up with me? I'm the same age as you are." I think it annoyed him a little bit, but yeah, I mean, meeting these guys who, you see them on TV, and if you're not, I guess they're used to it because they've been on TV, so they're used to dealing with other TV personalities. But I've never been on TV. I've never known any TV personalities well. So you definitely are in that. You could, yeah. I guess the wrestlers call us marks, right? So I was definitely a mark initially, for everybody I'd meet. But I got to know them, and once you get to know them, you kind of break that barrier down. And they've been really cool to get to know. And like I said, I met Tommy, and Stevie I've become friends with as well. I text with him frequently. We talk to each other. We share a lot of same interests. He actually worked at a video game store in the mall I used to go to when we were like, he was with ECW at the time. So this is, I was probably in my late teens, early 20s, and he was a manager there or something. And I had met him there. He obviously didn't remember me, but I actually traded emails telling him about the new Fire Pro that was coming out.
So. And you're stronger than me too. I'll tell you, out of all the people I've interviewed, I've been lucky enough to interview all the wrestlers. I think almost every single one of them were 10 times nicer than I ever expected them to be. Tommy Dreamer is the most intimidating son of a bitch I have ever talked to in my life. And I talked to him on the phone, not even in person. And I was sitting there shaking.
Yeah, I totally see that because he's a big dude, you know what I mean? And a funny story about that. The first time I met him, they were driving in to Too Many Games, which is a gaming convention near me, and I had brought him in to publicize the game, and I asked him, "Do you guys want anything?" He's like, "Yeah, if you could get a sandwich, like an egg sandwich or something." And he wanted an egg white sandwich, which is common. Like every convenience store has them. It wasn't like he was asking for anything extravagant, but apparently there was a run on sandwiches because of the convention. So all the local convenience stores were out of everything. So I have a buddy of mine going to like every store in like a 5-mile radius to get him the sandwich. So it took him a while to get it, and I go, "All right, here's your sandwich. Sorry it took so long, but they were all out of eggs." I'm like, "Do you want us to take out the green M&Ms of the bag too?" As a joke, I said, because I think Van Halen used to make people do that or something. But and I said, he's like, "Whatever." He's like kind of annoyed. I was treating him like a diva, but he was cool about it. And then one of my kids beat him at the game, my 11-year-old, which I found it kind of funny. So
you mentioned you've been working on this game now since 2018. And I mean, let's be honest, a lot changes in technology in a year, let alone 4 years. How do you keep abreast on the changes in this technology and the techniques that you're using for the game?
Well, the good thing is we're making a game that looks like it was made from an artistic standpoint in 1991. So, personally, I like pixel art. Like, I'm a fan of pixel art. And, there's a lot of great pixel art games being released to this day. So it definitely holds up better than the early 3D stuff for sure. And don't get me wrong, I play new stuff too. Like, I played, the newest Spider-Man game that came out in 2019 or whenever, gorgeous. And I'm looking forward to my oldest son has a Series X. And, I'm looking forward to eventually starting to play stuff on the new gen once we get done this game and get it out. But, from a technology standpoint, we didn't have to worry too much because of the type of game we were making. So it's not like we needed to release on the PS5 or the Xbox Series X RetroMania.
Yeah.
Because of the art style we're making, and so it wasn't too concerning. But I'll tell you, the fact working with Sony and Microsoft, there's certain additional hoops we have to jump through to make sure we're compatible with the next gen stuff.
I mean, to go off what you said about the pixel art thing, number one, the popularity of the Fire Pro World game shows right there that you have a market. So people obviously are digging stuff like that. So right away, people are going to be digging a game like yours. Second of all, just a personal thing, my game of obsession right now is the Sculpt Pilgrim versus the World game, which is basically a ripoff of Double Dragon. So I'm right there with you. I love those pixelated games as well.
Yeah, I think it kind of like, not that I'm not into the realistic stuff, because I like that too.
Of course.
But I do like, obviously there's a nostalgia kick to it, first
yeah.
of all, right? I mean, you tend to remember stuff like that you grew up with, and it has a special place in your heart. But on top of that, there's just certain things you can do with pixel art that look cool that you can't really do with rendered 3D, ray tracing graphics. It's different, and it's nice to have variety. Not that I always want to play pixel art games versus all I want to play is next gen, but I think it's good to have a different variety. And I think that's what's been missing in the wrestling game genre specifically. We haven't had much variety over the past, 5-10 years.
Speaking personally, I am not a traditional gamer. And a big reason is that I have not found a lot of games that appeal to my sense and sensibility, because I'm the kind of guy that grew up in an arcade playing Wrestlefest, playing your Saturday Night Slam Masters, playing these old 16-bit graphic games. So a lot of times whenever a new wrestling game comes out, I'm mostly buying it for simulations or for, a promoter simulator kind of stuff. RetroMania Wrestling is the first game to come out in a long time for someone like me that's like, I just want to pick up this game. I want to play it. I want to actually get involved in the action with it, and I want to enjoy myself and have a fun time. So I want to thank you personally for putting out a game for somebody like me, which kind of leads into my next question, which was that when it came to developing this game and when it came to marketing this game, was there, a little bit of, were you nervous at all about this idea of like, is there a market for something so kind of specific? Like wrestling itself is kind of a niche. And then to niche that niche, a lot of people would say that's an incredible risk. Like, was this something that you always kind of believed in 100% that, yes, this is definitely out there? Was there a lot of nerves involved with it? Like, kind of walk us through that mental process.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely nerves involved. You got to think a game wasn't remade in 31 years or 30 years. There may be a reason for that. When you look at the wrestling landscape, there's a reason not a ton of new wrestling games are coming out, you would think. So, yeah, there was absolutely, nervousness in there. And I went in thinking, hopefully I make my money back. But really the whole thing wasn't about money. I mean, obviously I'd like to make some money off it, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't the number one driver for me with the game. It was to make a fun wrestling game. But I've been pleasantly surprised with the amount of people that have gravitated towards the project, to the point where I'm getting angry social media posts because it's not out yet, right? So I guess angry ones are better than none. At least people are looking forward to and really want to play the game on console. And I think it hurt us that we're doing well on Steam and we're getting very good reviews on the Steam user boards, because then it just pisses the console people. I think we posted a video on YouTube like a week ago of just quotes to one of our music tracks of what people are saying on the Steam reviews. And it's our worst rated video that we've posted. Like every video we have is like 95 to 97% like ratio, every one we've posted ever. But definitely, maybe not quite that high. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but definitely in the like 90, above 94, I would say every video we've ever posted is at. Except this one is like an 88 or 89% positive. And when you look at the comments, like, well, where's the console version? And it's just people annoyed that the console version is down there. And trust me, I'm annoyed as well. But it's great to have, to answer your question though, I was definitely nervous about that. But I've been, definitely reassured. We're approaching 85,000 followers on our social media across all of our platforms. And then just the reception we got when we were at Too Many Games demoing it, and then when we were at PAX East last year around this time, the demos really went over really well. And then when we released it on Steam 2 weeks ago, it went over great. We had a little hiccup with the difficulty meter set a little too hard because I think our testers got too good at the game. So we did a quick patch that made it into the release for the consoles, luckily. So we did a quick patch on Steam, though, to kind of scroll back the default difficulty, but you can still ramp it up if you want to be challenged.
Well, you mentioned your testers. That does bring me to my next question, actually. How exactly did you develop effective test specifications for the quality assurance of the game?
So, I've been working in software engineering. I have a master's in software engineering. I've been working in finance and accounting software for 20 years now, over 20 years. So, I have a background in it. And my three primary testers were all guys who volunteered to help out. One of them came on and gets paid a little bit, but they all just were expert and very meticulous at game testing. So we went in and we just basically tested every single part of the game through the menus, every move, every player. One guy in particular named Chris, he was one of the ones who came on late when I asked for some additional beta testers. And I was just looking for people to get some initial feedback from. Maybe they'd log a few bugs if they noticed anything big. He must have played the game 100 plus hours and logged a ton of bugs and really just knocked it out of the park. So going to the community was a huge help. And then we did have some internal people that we paid to do some testing as well that followed your more traditional test scripts, launch the game, play as X, Y, Z characters, play in X, Y, and Z game modes. The other thing we did build in, and this was actually a fan request. I was never a big sim guy where I'd let the AI fight each other, but we had a request for that early on, and I'm like, well, and I talked to my lead programmer. He's like, well, that's pretty easy to do. We're already developing the AI for the computer. We can easily do that. And it turned out to be a great way to test the game because I had 4 machines running at once, and I would just keep starting matches over and over and over again just to get, so in one day I could get 60 or 48 hours of testing in one day just by running it on all these machines simultaneously. So I think that really helped, and it showed in our Steam launch because we had very few, we weren't perfect by any means, but we had very few bugs crop up in our Steam launch. Nothing that seemed to be overwhelmingly causing any negative experience for the gamers. We had a couple. And we're still working on that list and trying to resolve them all. But like I said, nothing that's really a detriment to the player base. Right
on. So you've already announced a couple DLCs for the game. Remind me, I know you have Curtis Hughes, you have James Storm. There's one I'm missing.
DLCB, downloadable Chris Bay. So Chris.
There you go. Chris Bay.
Yeah.
Which those are exciting. I know this is a long shot, but can you give us any hints on anyone you're talking to for the future?
We have a ton of ideas, and we do not lack fan suggestions on that front either. So I'm pretty sure anyone who's made a TV appearance has been requested in the last 30 years.
All right, I have to ask how many CM Punk requests have you gotten so far?
No, we've definitely got it, but it's not as many as you think.
Really?
No, I think we definitely gotten it, but I think it's probably more legends.
Okay.
Than anything else.
There's your Moldberg there, Adam.
Hey, listen, speaking as a fan myself, if I'm going to get to throw my vote in the ring, what I would love to see is a RetroMania Indie Mania edition where you bring back all those guys that were in the tournament that you held and you put them in their own edition of the game, because I need me some RJ City in a video game form.
That is beautiful.
That was such a fun thing to do. I will take credit for the idea, the initial idea, but my my marketing guy, Mike T, he ran the whole thing. He solicited the feedback from the fans. That was another guy that I met on LinkedIn. And a quick story about him: we were set to have a phone call, kind of an interview, on a Friday night, and he called or sent me a message. He's like, "Hey, can we move this to Monday?" I'm like, oh, here we go. You know what I mean? I just thought, he's gonna not be reliable. He's like, well, I've just bought a WWF Superstars arcade cabinet, and if I don't get it out of my living room, my wife is just gonna kill me. So I'm like, yes, we can move it, and you're hired. I knew right away that he was the guy for me. And Mike had a social media background, marketing background, and is really in tune with wrestling. Like, he's a huge old school fan. He's a huge indie fan. He has one of the coolest pieces of memorabilia I've ever seen. He has a WrestleMania 3 poster that's signed by almost everybody that attended the event.
Wow.
I think a couple guys died before he could get it, but it's really cool. But he took the Indie Mania idea. He's like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do this. So I just had the initial kind of seed, and he ran with the whole thing, did all the details. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't follow a ton of indie wrestling. I knew some stuff, but not a ton of it. And I did not even know who Warhorse was before we did the tournament. And I became a fan of him and Chris. On top of that, we went after him after he didn't win Indie Mania. He was in the Final Four. But I was so impressed with his work. I'm a big, I've started to talk a little bit like these wrestlers from talking about them so much, but I'm a big mark for his moveset, Chris's moveset. So, and that's what we're doing right now is we're programming his animations and struggling a little bit of how to do some of his moves, how to key them off, because they're pretty elaborate. But it's fun. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, Indie Mania was awesome.
As a huge GCW and Black Label Pro fan, when you brought in Warhorse, that just tickled me pink, because that right there showed how in tune with your market you really are. Like this game is going to be for the wrestling fan, the guys who know who Warhorse is. It's the guy who knows who Chris Bay is. And of course, you have your Road Warriors for the other guys, and that's awesome. But it's going to be for those hardcore marks, for like Adam and I. And you, I think, through this whole process have really shown that. And you've been very transparent with that as well, with your vlogs, with going on, being very honest on your social media posts, with how the game's coming along, which I think is kind of lacking with the bigger promotions. You don't see somebody from Microsoft jump down going, yeah, I know you wanted this game a year ago, but this is why you're not. But you've been very in touch with your fan base. Is that just who you are, or is that something you said from the beginning? This is what I want to do. Where did that come from?
No, I mean, I think it's just who I am. I'm pretty upfront and honest about things, and part of it was, I think, a necessity from a marketing standpoint too, though, because we made some slip-ups early. I completely underestimated the time frame, and I'm not going to use Corona as an excuse, because that definitely hit us, but the majority of it was just due to planning on my part. Development took longer, artwork took longer, licensing took longer, and now we're almost across the finish line, and certification is taking longer than I thought it was going to take. And I think game 2 will go a lot smoother. Hopefully we get there, but I think I felt going through that process, there's 2 ways I can handle it. When we first came, because initially we wanted to launch first quarter last year. Like, we were targeting 2020 this is back in 2018, and it's really hard to hit a date 2 years out to begin with. And I'd never made a video game before. Everyone on my team has, but I think this was a lot of theirs. This was probably the biggest project they'd worked on, and so there was definitely a learning curve involved. And I just figured, I said, how about I was talking to Mike again, my social media guy. I go, how about we want to grow our YouTube channel and reach an audience there? How about I start doing developers vlogs? And when I did it, I'm not a big on editing. I don't spend a ton of time editing those videos, and it shows. But I just wanted to give, people who were we seem to be developing a fan base, and I wanted to give those fans an insight into, what I was struggling with. Here's how we're making this game. Here's the delays we're coming up with. Here's how I screwed up. And I figure you see so much, especially in politics, people get caught or people get called out for stuff that they tried to hide. And I really didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to something to bite me in the ass later down the road. And I'm not that type of person to begin with. So, it was kind of second nature for me to just be open and honest with people and say, hey, look, yeah, you're right. I did say this date and I didn't account for X, Y, and Z. That's why we missed that date. I mean, it's not like I'm trying to not hit dates. You know what I mean? And I think for the most part, 95% of people love it. But you still get, it is social media. So you get, oh, you said it was coming out on the 12th.
Well,
or you said it was coming out on the 26th, and we hit Steam on the 26th. When we announced the 26th, we hit the 26th for Steam. But the certification process has been, and nothing against Nintendo. It's nothing Nintendo, Sony, or Microsoft are doing. They're following their normal business practice. It's just that, we submit it. They find something wrong with it. We have to fix it. And from talking to other developers, it's just like, until you go through it, you don't know.
right.
There's no documentation saying this is how long certification takes.
Mhm.
If we were perfect, we'd be done by now. If we would have gone through it perfectly, we weren't. We weren't perfect.
Yeah.
But with that said, again, I mentioned this earlier, and to add on top of that, when we did launch Steam on time, and it did well, and it's reviewed well, and people want it more on the console than they did before, seeing all the people playing on Steam.
Mhm.
And now we really get the angry trolls are coming out and saying, give us the game, give us the game.
Yeah.
So, but again, I try to look at it as, well, at least someone's asking for it. You know what I mean? It's like, it would suck if no one cared.
And that was going to be my next question, because I mean, up to about a year ago, I was seeing people come out going, you would put out an update for the game, and they say, yeah, I bet this game's never coming out, and I'm not even in your chair, and it was frustrating to me stuff because I'm such a supporter of the game. So I couldn't imagine how you would feel, but. What is greater, the frustration of people being jerks, or the feeling, well, at least he gives a shit?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like, I'm only human, right? No one wants to hear negative criticism, and there's certain types of people that we've heard stuff from that offer good constructive criticism. So, which is and everyone, if you're taking the time to comment, you obviously like the concept. At a minimum, you like the concept, right? Or you wouldn't even be watching, or you wouldn't be taking the time to comment at it. But it's tough. You question some people that are really, negative and hurtful on their comments, and it sucks. And that's the stuff you focus on.
I've never heard of a negative wrestling fan. That's very odd. Adam, before we start wrapping up, what do you have, my friend?
First of all, I just want to say that the strategy that you employed with those developer blogs have been really a positive thing, because it's given guys like me a chance to follow along with you. And I'll tell you something, that has made the journey itself getting to the game all the better, because now, in a small way, I feel like I was a part of this journey. Even if I've just been watching from the sidelines. So I love that you did that. I hope you'll continue that when you get to part 2. And by the way, you mentioning a second game made my heart beat a little bit faster there. So thank you for that. So let me kind of piggyback off of that and ask, if you have plans for a second game, which it sounds like you do, what are some things, just off the top of your head? Let's clarify. Mike's not promising these things. These are just me asking him, what are some of the things you would like to do to kind of challenge yourself and progress and evolve the game for the second round?
Oh, I mean, my wish list was high for this one, and eventually we had to scale back a little bit, because you have big, your eyes are bigger than your stomach kind of thing when you start out on anything. And I wanted to do absolutely everything right out of the gate, and I quickly realized that just wasn't going to happen. So there's some stuff, it's hard to say that what we want to do in a game 2 versus what I just want to add to this game, because we're in the day and age where we can do updates, we can do DLC. Like I said before, this isn't a money isn't the driving force behind this game. It really is my passion for the game itself and making a game I want to play. So, there's things that I hope to maybe even squeeze into this game. Women's wrestlers, was a big omission just from a budgetary standpoint, where we didn't have enough money to do both women models and male models up front, because our art pipeline was the biggest budgetary line of our game with all the art assets we did. More of everything, more wrestlers, more moves, more venues, a deeper story mode. I think if, especially what you guys were, just to piggyback on what you guys were saying before, for those wrestling fans out there, there's a lot of, when you play through story mode and you read the dialogue, there's a lot of nods to the wrestling world.
That's awesome.
So you can see, and if you want spoilers, there's some people who've already streamed the story mode out there, and they got big kicks out of it, going through and hearing some of the stuff. But just pretty much more of everything. We were definitely inspired by a bunch of different wrestling games when we made this, but there's still some other cool stuff that other games have done that we would like to emulate and put our spin on as well. So really, anything you've ever seen and some things you've never seen, we would like to add. So that's kind of my catch-all.
Did you ever consider? Did you ever consider doing a creator? Did you ever consider doing a creator wrestler? Or what would be the difficulty in that?
Yeah, I mean, we did. The big issue there is really cost.
Right.
Because if I want to be able to make The Rock, I better make sure I have the People's Elbow, the Rock Bottom, his signature taunts. You got to have all the moves for The Rock. Well, if you want to make Goldberg, you got to have all his stuff, and Hogan. Mm-hmm. And so the number of animations required to do that just astronomically climbs, and then so does the cost associated with it. So the other thing is, we kind of wanted to stay away from it, we're already going to be compared to Fire Pro because we're a 2D game.
Of course.
And we knew out of the bat we weren't going to be able to compete with their create a suite, right? So why I didn't want to do it out of the gate. I wanted to be known for something else, and where I think and I don't want to say better or worse, but I say where we're different from Fire Pro is our gameplay. Our gameplay is quicker. We're not a simulation. We do have some timing-based stuff in the grappling, which I liked, but it's not as there is a button mashing as well to this game. And it's definitely more a pick-up-and-play, faster-paced wrestling game, and a more arcade wrestling game than Fire Pro is. And that's not to say that's better or worse than Fire Pro, because you're speaking to somebody who's put a ton of hours in Fire Pro too. So I was huge on Six-Man Scramble on the Saturn. I had the 6-player tap that I played with my friends. I downloaded things off the internet and printed them out to make all my creator wrestlers. I got somebody to mod my Sega Saturn. So I don't want to disparage that product because I'm a big fan of it as well, but I think we're definitely a different experience than that.
You definitely sound like another Philadelphia boy when you say that if you can't compete with another company, don't try, just be better. I think I've heard someone else say that from Philadelphia.
And I'm just going to pick up from that and say, you talked about wanting this to be an arcade game and wanting this to be a lot of fun. This is a game that is meant to be played in the arcades, in a cabinet, which leads me to the big question I had here, because I've been staring at that beautiful cabinet behind you this entire time here, which is, tell me about hooking up with II Arcade. How did that come about? And most importantly, can you pull some strings and get them to ship me one of those cabinets across the border? I will pay the money. We just can't get them in Canada yet. So if you could pull some strings for me, Mike, I would really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, so Jong, the CEO there, approached Mike Archer, who's on our licensing and business development team, and said they wanted to bring RetroMania to their platform. So for those of you listening who don't know what iArcade is, it is a connected arcade machine. So they have their own ecosystem or storefront, like an app store, and they're licensing various classic arcade games, and they're going after newer licenses as well. One of the new ones they have is Dead Cells, a more recent game. that'll be available on it as well at some point. But they have Dragon's Lair, Double Dragon, and RetroMania will be on it as well. So as part of the deal, I kind of jokingly said to John, yeah, we'll put RetroMania on your platform, but you got to give us some advertising on the side of one of those arcade machines. And he's like, all right, we'll make a RetroMania themed one. I thought he was kind of joking, and he was serious. So they made a RetroMania, and that's a prototype that I have behind me. So we're working on the iArcade version of RetroMania now. We already have it running on there. We have some optimization to do. Since it's a different aspect ratio as well, we have to make some changes to some of the artwork. But it's a really cool machine. That company is great. They kind of have the same approach, so it was a really good fit for us. Jong is super transparent. I think he does 2 videos a week to keep everybody abreast of what's going on with their production. They recently fulfilled all of their Kickstarter promises, shipped all of their Kickstarter units, and are in the process of really doing great things over there. So it just was a good fit for us.
I just have one last kind of lightning round of questioning for you here, Mike. Real quick, I want to know, who is your favorite wrestler, arena, and animation in the game?
So my favorite wrestler is Jeff Cobb.
I knew you were going to say that.
So
I've watched those videos.
Yeah. So I love specifically the Tour of the Islands move that we put in game. And I was really annoyed to our animator because I was very picky about how I wanted that animation to look. In the original Wrestlefest, there's a Power Slam, and it was a bunch of wrestlers did it, but it was totally modeled after Ted DiBiase's Power Slam because he did one of the most beautiful Power Slams ever. It was just so technically perfect. And they gave it to a bunch of characters. And doing that move was very fulfilling to me playing the original game. Every time I did it, I just could do it over and over. And that's how the Tour of the Islands move is to me in RetroMania. I just love doing the Tour of the Islands. And then having Ian, like this is my favorite line of Ian, saying, "Aloha means goodbye." Jeff Cobb with Tour of the Islands. He says it in the game. And it is like my favorite. I get goosebumps just telling you guys this because it's really like I sat down finally this weekend to finally, we're waiting on the consoles. My programmers had the weekend off to recharge their batteries because we have some iArcade work to do this week, and we're waiting on all the consoles to get back to us. But I sat down and just to play RetroMania for the first time in weeks just for fun. And I immediately played 10 Pounds of Gold mode with Jeff Cobb. And just hearing Ian's voice saying, aloha means goodbye, because I've heard him say it on Ring of Honor television. And I love that. So that's my favorite animation, and that's my favorite wrestler. My favorite arena is the Too Many Games arena. Hell is a close second that Warhorse designed.
Love that.
But Too Many Games just has a lot of my favorite YouTubers scattered throughout. The Game Chasers I'm a big fan of, if you haven't heard of them, but they're like the American Pickers, or the guys who go around into looking for antiques and buying stuff. Well, they do it with video games. I don't even think they were the first ones to do it with video games, but they're the ones I watched. I watched a lot of those episodes with my oldest son before. And I'm just a big fan of theirs. So, they're in that scene. Jay and Silent Bob make an appearance in the scene.
Yeah.
So we know Justin over at the studio that made Jay and Silent Bob Mall Brawl. So I've become they publish some stuff through Limited Games. So Doug from Limited Games put us in contact, and I said it would be cool if I could kind of have you guys at a booth, because you do make video games, and it's a video game arena or a video game convention arena. It would be cool, and you guys would fit in. And he was totally down for it. The Pat and Ian on the CU podcast that I've been listening to for years. Grand Pooh Bear is a streamer who I've just recently. Mike, our marketing guy, has been a big fan of his forever. He turned me on to him. RGT85, of course, is a big wrestling fan. I've been watching him for years as well. So he was gracious enough to announce us coming to the Nintendo Switch. And he's got a pretty big channel, and I was even intimidated by him a little bit. Not that I needed to be, because he's a super cool guy, but He gave us instant visibility by agreeing to do a video with Stevie Richards and announcing the game. So, and there's a bunch of guys scattered throughout the whole background. So it was just a pretty cool looking arena. The ring will change on some of the logos. So that's my favorite arena.
I'm telling you now, my new life's ambition is for Game 2 to get the Counted Out team animated into that game. That's all I'm going to say.
No, we can do, it's funny. We've been asked to do like Portland retro gaming. So maybe we could find a spot in there when we do it, because we definitely got great reaction from the people we included in the Too Many Games arena. And we got a couple late additions like the Retro Buzz that I've been watching for a while, and a couple other shows that we've been doing, P-Dub's Arcade Loft, and some YouTubers that I've more recently started watching that we were able to add to the game at the last minute. But yeah, hey, I wouldn't rule it out.
Well, you let us know what we got to do, and we'll do it. I mean, even if we have to talk to, I mean, you've already worked with a friend of our show. He just had Nikita Koloff on the show a couple weeks ago. So if I got to get Nikita to grease the wheel for me.
Nikita
he was one of our
really nice guy. Yeah. I had the pleasure of meeting him at that same show I saw Animal in Philadelphia in November of 2019, and that was the first time I met him. I was super intimidated by him because I was only a kid when he was wrestling, and my vivid memory of him is clotheslining David Crockett in an interview segment.
Yeah,
and his eyes were so terrifying to me as a kid. And I met him, though, I'll tell you, like, couldn't have been a nicer person. And really, regardless of what religion you are, he is doing great work just for charity and charitable causes now. So definitely, a great person doing a lot of great work. Very easy to deal with, again, just a top-notch individual.
So on behalf of myself, Tyler, and Adam, we really, really, really want to thank you for being here, Mike, because I know how busy you are. I know how much work you're doing. I'm surprised if you were getting any sleep right now with all the work you're getting in this game. So thank you so much for taking time out to do this. We are going to put all your links into the bio of the show, but just for the people who need to hear with their ears, why don't you throw out some of your social media plugs?
Yeah, we're at RetroManiaWrestling.com. We're available now on Steam. So RetroMania Wrestling, you can just search Retro in Steam, and I think we come up first or second. Or you shoot up, search Wrestling, and then we're one of the top of the list too. So RetroMania Wrestling on Steam, we're available now. We'll be everywhere on console, depending on when this drops. Maybe already or within the next week or two. We're hoping we get through all of the certification process.
Are you just doing a digital release, or is there going to eventually be a physical release?
Yeah. So we already have a deal with Limited Run Games. So they're going to be doing the physical release. We don't have a date set for that yet. They like to get as much content into that before they do the physical. And I know we're going to have at least some DLC coming down the pipeline shortly. So we'll have it. I'm sure once we decide, we're meeting with them once we get through the console launch to work on a date for that.
Well, you keep us updated with any marketing or touring you're doing for this game, Mike, and we're going to make sure our listeners hear it. We're 100% behind this game. I haven't been this excited for any video game in a long, long time. So we're supporting this game big time.
I definitely appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys having me.
And thank you for being here, man. We're gonna count ourselves out here, guys, and stay tuned for the end of the show. All you listeners, and again, thank you, Mike, and thank you for joining me today, Adam.
Hey, man, it was my pleasure. Mike, I'll be checking my mailbox for that arcade machine, okay?
Will do.